Welcome, Gunrunner.
A few weeks ago I did a story or video on consoles that could be fully upgraded into existing home computers due to being based on the same or similar hardware. And there are actually loads of examples of consoles that are based on home computer hardware out there, which is actually pretty surprising when you consider that the vast majority of these were a huge failure, including some of the worst selling consoles of all time, like the Amstrad GX4000, Casio PV1000 and the Commodore 64 game system. In fact, it's hard to think of one that was a success, because even the best known examples like the Atari 5200, Sega SG-1000 and Atari XE game system failed to set the world alight. I guess you could argue that the ColecoVision and Xbox count, I suppose, but that's a whole other argument. And this very discussion got me thinking about other computer-based consoles that were announced but never released, that I've never even mentioned on the channel before, that were more than worthy of their own video. So I took these and mixed them in with a few more well-known examples to make this video happen. So let's jump back into the history books once more to look at these unreleased oddities, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on what you've seen at the end. Now let's get going.
When you were growing up, you learned you were facing a world full of competition. There were so many of you with all the right credentials. To succeed today, you need a way to stand out from the crowd, to make the most of your special kind of music. Introducing Amiga, the computer that gives you undreamed of creative power. To work faster and more productively. With built-in color graphics no other comes close to. Amiga, the first personal computer to give you a creative edge.
The computer we now know and love as the Commodore Amiga was of course designed by one J. Miner and the same team of engineers behind both the Atari 2600 and 400-800 computers. After developing these machines, they chose to leave Atari to join Activision co-founder Larry Kaplan at his new company Hi-Toro. Larry wanted to develop both games for home systems as well as create the next generation of consoles through an advanced hardware division, and it was this part of the company that he wanted J. Miner to head up. Not long after being formed, Hi-Toro would be rebranded as Amiga Technologies, and plans began to develop a powerful new 16-bit system. Codenamed Lorraine, it was originally intended to be a games console that could also be upgraded to a full-blown home computer. The problem was that they ran out of money very quickly. So Atari offered Amiga a substantial loan to keep on developing the system, which would then give them exclusive rights to license the technology. This would provide Atari with a successor to the 2600, 5200 and 7800 consoles, as well as the Atari 8-bit computers. In fact, there was even a plan to develop a computer called the 1800 XL that would be based on this new Amiga technology, but also be backwards compatible with the existing Atari 8-bit range. But just as Amiga got the Lorraine to prototype stage and were ready to show it to Atari, a huge spanner was thrown in the works when Atari was split up by then owners Warner Brothers and the consumer division was sold to ex-Commodore CEO Jack Tramiel. The Amiga team quickly decided that they didn't want to work with Jack. He already had quite the reputation in the industry for being a hard person to work with and one that would do anything to cut costs. J. Miner and his team knew that they needed a partner who would fully invest in their ideas, and rather ironically, it was Jack's former company that they would turn to for help. Due to the exclusivity deal that they already had with Atari, it was impossible for Amiga to license the Lorraine to anyone else, but they found a way round it, and that was selling the company lock, stock and barrel to Commodore. This new ownership would make any previous contracts null and void, giving Commodore complete access to the Lorraine technology at the same time. However, Commodore had no interest in entering the console space. They were a computer company, and insisted that the Amiga, as it was now solely known, would continue its development path as a high-end home micro. And the rest, as they say, is history, as the Amiga 1000 was released in October 1995, and the idea of an Amiga console was completely forgotten about until nearly a decade later when the Amiga CD-32 arrived on the scene. But that's a whole nother story altogether that I've covered pretty well on this channel before, so check the links in the comments if you want to know more. This next one is quite fascinating for several reasons. Firstly, because I've never covered or even spoken about the Indrema L600 on the channel before. Secondly, because it's not based on a specific computer, rather an operating system, as the L in the name actually refers to the fact it runs on Linux. Lastly, because it would have been the very first open source console ever released, not requiring any sort of official license to develop games for it. Known initially as the Indrema Entertainment System, the console was first announced in early 2000 by Indrema founder John Gildred, an American entrepreneur who was already well known in the home computing sector, having made his name at OpenSoft, an early pioneer in the internet communications sector. Having seen the completely closed console market that was dominated by companies like Nintendo, Sony and Microsoft, he felt he could blow it wide open by making a new system that was completely open source. Not just the software, but also for users to upgrade and expand it how they wished. A pretty admirable and exciting vision, I'm sure you'll agree. The console was first announced at the Linux World Show in early 2000, where a prototype unit was shown running Quake to much excitement for those in attendance. At the show, Indrema revealed that they planned to release it just in time for Christmas that year for just $299. Besides playing games and music from CDs, it would also support DVD playback, MP3 files, feature a web browser, and perhaps most remarkably, work like an early TiVo box where you could digitally record your favourite TV shows. Indrema promised there would be at least 30 compatible games ready for launch, as well as several compatible accessories like external hard drives and controllers. In terms of specs, it would feature 96MB of RAM, a 10MB hard drive, 1080p HDTV compatibility, a 50MHz AMD Duron processor, and a GeForce 3 GPU that would be able to process up to 180 million polygons per second. This made it very comparable to the leading consoles on the market at this time in the Sega Dreamcast and Sony PlayStation, and the ability to upgrade this hardware made it a lot more future-proof than both of them. Unfortunately, this initial excitement was short-lived, as it was soon revealed that Indrema would need around $10 million of investment to make it happen, and was struggling to find anyone willing to take the risk of backing a new startup with no experience in this sector. After several delays that saw the release date eventually pushed back by a year, Indrema admitted defeat and officially closed down on the 6th of April 2001, with the company's philosophical founder offering the following advice to anyone else with the same idea: finish your product before talking about it. This next story actually begins in the year of my birth, 1977, which was also the same year the industry-changing Atari 2600 video computer system hit the market. Riding high on the success of their calculators, Texas Instruments was starting to explore the idea of entering the home computer market too, along with the likes of Apple and Tandy Radio Shack, who were just about to release home micros of their own, of course. After much deliberating, it was decided that the company would go for a four-pronged attack, which would include 3 computers and a console to compete with the aforementioned Atari 2600 and the Fairchild Channel F, which had launched the year before. I won't go into the story of the 3 computers much here, firstly because it's not the subject of this video, and secondly because I've covered them in other videos, which I've linked down in the description as always. After much arguing within TI about what these machines would be and what hardware they would use, which very much stalled their development, it soon became clear that they would design a single chipset that could be used in several different configurations to cover all bases. Wally Rines, who was heading up that part of the company at the time, proposed that they finalise the games console first, then add a simple keyboard to complete the affordable home computer design before looking at the high-end business machines later on. There was now a vision within the company which was based around the tagline "One Company, One Computer Architecture", a concept where a single processor model would scale from consoles to its high-end mini computers. The TMS 9900, a single-chip implementation of TI's 16-bit TI 990 mini computer design, would be the CPU in low-end models of that platform, with development of a new compatible chip for the high-end business machines. This would be joined by a TMS 9918A video display processor and a TMS 9919 3-channel sound chip. Both would use ROM cartridges, with the computer having expansion ports to add tape and disk drives too. It soon became obvious within TI that whilst they knew plenty about computers and the software needed to make them function, they knew absolutely nothing about video games. So they decided that they needed to seek out a partner to help deliver the console part of their vision. Rather bizarrely, the company they chose wasn't somebody already creating video games, but someone who was better known for more traditional games, the Milton Bradley Company. A deal was signed with the historic Massachusetts-based business to supply the games for this new console and also handle the marketing distribution too. The latter part of this made perfect sense, as MB already had inroads into all the major toy stores across the whole of North America. But from here everything gets rather hazy, because we don't really know why the TI console was left unreleased or what led to its cancellation. Most people seem to agree that TI simply decided to concentrate on making home computers that could also play games and were spreading themselves too thin, and thought that MB could do a better job of handling that part of things. Indeed, MB decided to buy all the rights to the system from TI and planned to release it themselves as the MBX. According to Mike Lanchieri, who headed up the project, MB took the original design and added a host of upgrades so it would have clear superiority over the Atari 2600 and Mattel Intellivision. The MBX would add voice recognition, speech synthesis, and an action input keypad. So why did this new version of the console also suffer the same fate? Well, Mike Lanchieri has explained the answers to that too. Just as MB were getting ready to show their console to the world, the ColecoVision was released, which, as you probably know, was based around a very similar Texas Instruments chipset. This led the then president of Milton Bradley, Jim Shea, to cancel the release of the MBX, feeling that an already crowded market couldn't support a fifth home console, and the obvious similarities between the ColecoVision and MBX would mean their console no longer stood out from the crowd. However, so much work had already gone into the development of the MBX that Shea was against the idea of canning it completely, and Mike Lanchieri was asked to adapt the technology to be used with a TI-99/4A computer instead as an add-on device. Unfortunately, the MBX didn't succeed as an add-on either, as the TI-99/4A was killed off not long after the device's release, when Texas Instruments got caught in a suicidal price war with Commodore that saw them exit the home computer market completely. I've actually covered this story in depth in my TI-99 Amazing Facts video, so if you want to know more, then go click the link down below. For me personally, the Atari ST console rumour is one that has been given far too much attention over the years, with a lot of misinformation being spouted about it online. I say this because once you look at all the facts behind the fable, it was never anything more than a short-lived idea, with nothing much of note ever coming from it. But that's precisely why I really wanted to cover it in this video, because it's time to set the story straight about this much talked about machine. The first mentions of an Atari ST console actually started to appear in the British press around 1989 as something known as Project Robin. But the origins of these reports remains very vague, as the magazines in question would usually state it came from an Atari source, but nothing more substantial. Now it's possible that these magazines were being fed false information by somebody claiming to be close to the company, because Trammell-era Atari had a notoriously frosty relationship with the press of the era, so it's very doubtful they actually came from them, and of course they rarely spoke to the press about projects until they had something substantial to show anyway. Or could it be that they were just making it up, of course? Or maybe it was some kind of vague industry rumour, who knows? However, the more likely origin of this suspicious story was the ongoing development of the enhanced Atari STE computers, which were released at the end of the very same year these rumours started. The STE was designed to be much more games capable in order to compete with the Amiga a lot better, offering up things like hardware scrolling, more colours, a blitter chip and PCM stereo sound. And indeed, it was actually discovered quite recently that the STE has a hidden hardware register called GameCart that would allow the computer to access up to 512k of ROM through the rather underutilised cartridge slot on the side of the system, instead of the usual 128k. This suggests that Atari did, at least briefly, think about an Atari ST based console based on the STE hardware that would also allow its games to be played on its home computer oriented sibling too. and this is very much backed up by former Atari engineer Mike Fulton, who helped to design the upgraded STE hardware, who once stated in an interview that the idea of an STE-based console was indeed pondered over, but was quickly dismissed due to the high cost of producing the hardware, which made it unsuitable for a low-cost console. He also confirmed that the code name for the STE computer was indeed Robin, a bird theme that would continue with the Sparrow, which became the Falcon. The game cart register was obviously hidden once Atari made the decision not to pursue the idea any further. It's also worth mentioning that the mysterious Atari Mirai prototype has often been asserted to be a mock-up of an Atari ST based console, but that theory has been pretty much put to bed by the emergence of the Super XE game system schematics. If you want to know more about the Mirai, and indeed the Super Zegs, then check the links in the description for standalone videos on both of these fascinating stories. I had to leave this tale until last, because the story of the mythical Infinium Labs Phantom has become almost legendary over the years. It's easily one of the most famous unreleased consoles, and one that is still shrouded in a lot of mystery. Indeed, I've lost count of how many times people have asked me to cover it on the channel. I just had to figure out the right way to do it, and now here we are. Infinium Labs was founded by Tim Roberts in 2002 to make a range of different accessories and add-ons for the PC market, including things like keyboards and controllers. But around a year after, in January 2003, the company issued a press release saying that it would soon release a revolutionary new gaming platform, with an on-demand video game service delivering games through an online subscription. This press release had no specific information about the system's specs or capabilities, but it did include a computer-generated mock-up of the console. Due to the ridiculous use of buzzwords and hyperbole, combined with the complete lack of concrete details, the announcement, as well as the product itself, was openly derided by the press of the era, and it nearly came to an end right there. But Infinium Labs chose to soldier on regardless, and promised something special was coming. When details did start to arrive, they were still pretty vague, but the big talking point was that the Phantom would be the very first digital-only console, with no cartridge port or CD drive in sight. The DRM controlled software itself would be delivered by a company called Disstream, and it was promised that a wide selection of games would be available to download from launch. It also announced the 17th of August 2003 release date at a price of $399, with a subscription-based online service at just under $10 a month. But then it seemed to go all quiet, although Infinium Labs were adamant that they were still working on the Phantom. From here things started to go wrong, very wrong, as several trusted media sources started reporting that the company had severe financial problems and had ripped off several investors. This most notably included Hard OCP, who did a full expose on Infinium Labs that subsequently led to a very expensive lawsuit that the company ended up losing, with Hard OCP awarded a huge amount of damages in return. In the meantime, they actually took a Phantom prototype to QuakeCon 2004, hoping to quell all the talk about the console being nothing more than vaporware, but Hard OCP actually turned up at the event and smashed said prototype to pieces. I simply don't have the time to explain everything that happened next here. The story is that convoluted and crazy, but I do suggest that you all go and look it up because it really is completely nuts. There were more lawsuits, government-led investigations into fraud and financial irregularity, and numerous changes to the leadership of the company. What I do want to tell you though is that Infinium Labs tried to continue the charade until January 2006 when, after a seemingly endless list of revised release dates for the Phantom, they finally admitted defeat and cancelled the console completely. In an effort to save face, they announced that they would now release the Lapboard, a specially designed wireless keyboard controller and mouse combo, originally designed for use with the Phantom separately, and they did finally getting this to market in 2007 after several delays, to a very mixed response. This was far from the success that the company hoped, and after several years of struggles, they finally closed down in 2011 with yet more investigations into financial irregularities around the founder Tim Roberts to follow. Interestingly, in 2012, a prototype of the original Phantom console did actually see the light of day, when somebody took it into a PC repair shop in Florida in hope of getting it working. The owner of said shop found a mess of random parts, some working and some not, that he did eventually manage to cobble together and get working, at which point he took some photos before handing it back to the owner to never be seen again. Numerous attempts to track this phantom owner down have come to nothing sadly, and this story remains as mysterious as the one around the console itself. There is of course a well documented prototype of the second revision of the Phantom console out there too, the boring one that looks like a set-top box, but this is nowhere near as interesting in my opinion. But hey, at least it's something. And that runs on my look at 5 unreleased computer-based consoles. Which of these systems do you think deserve to be released? Or do you think it was right to cancel these consoles before completion? We also love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, DOS Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Frosty, Mark Strickland, Climatorn, Trogdor the Burninator, Daniel Skronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, David Maddox, Your Eyes Are Bleeding, Joe Casara, Classic Gamer 74, Bernard Santu, Peter Grantham, Noah Mann, Josh Hartman, Martin Wiggins and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.